Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. It looks like their latest tiff has been put behind them because the Israeli Prime Minister will reportedly be meeting U.S. President Donald Trump next month. Netanyahu will be visiting Washington for the annual AIPAC conference, where the meeting should take place. The get-together will come after an awkward spat between the United States and Israel, after the White House shot down Netanyahu's assertion that the U.S. and Israel were discussing proposals for Israel to annex West Bank settlements. Netanyahu's far-right Likud party has been pushing to formally apply Israeli law to the settlements and allow unlimited construction in the settlements. The Palestinians claim doing so would destroy all efforts to try and save the peace process, a process they believe can no longer be led by the United States as the primary mediator. The White House doesn't seem to be worried, however. The U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is in the Middle East, and he told Jordan that the U.S. is as committed as ever to seeing Middle East peace.
With respect to the Middle East peace process, President Trump remains committed to seeing a Middle East peace process go forward. And as I indicated, I think the decision taken on Jerusalem was about the United States and our recognition of Jerusalem and where we choose to place our embassy. But the president was clear also in his statement, and as I just indicated in my statement, that the final status, the final borders in Jerusalem are up to the parties to decide. So it does not preclude a two-state solution. If that is the solution the parties seek, the U.S. would support that.
Despite the police allegations of corruption against the Israeli Prime Minister, polls seem to be indicating that support for Netanyahu may actually be rising. While half of Israelis seem to want the Israeli leader to step down, it looks like the popularity of his ruling Likud party has been largely unaffected. It's been just a day since police published detailed criminal graft allegations against the prime minister in 2 different cases. Now, Israeli media has released a series of polls studying the response of the Israeli public. Israel's Channel 10 News claims that 50% of respondents believe Netanyahu should resign, while 42% say he should continue serving as premier. Hadashot News shows 36% calling for Netanyahu to stay in power, with 48% saying he should step down. Here's what's interesting, though. Back in December, just 2 months ago, a similar Hadashot poll showed that just 28% of respondents believe Netanyahu should stay in power if police were to recommend bribery charges, with a whopping 60% advocating for him to resign. That means that the percentage of Israelis who believe Netanyahu should remain premier, despite the allegations, has actually gone up. On Tuesday, police recommended that Netanyahu be indicted for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. According to analysts, Netanyahu can remain in power even if he is indicted, and it may take a year or longer before the Israel Attorney General decides whether or not to charge the leader. All right, 17 people are dead and 16 more wounded following a massive shooting in a high school in Florida. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has just announced that there were no Israeli casualties, but several of the students killed were in fact Jewish.
We were talking to each other, but everyone kept swishing each other, and just everyone was pretty scared, and some people were crying. And just people were trying to comfort each other and saying it was going to be all right, and we were going to get out of here.
Yeah, well, one of my friends, I haven't heard from him since the shooting happened, so I'm here. Hopefully I can find something. That's why I'm here right now.
Former student Nicolas Cruz reportedly opened fire at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School with an AR-15, sending kids diving under desks as they texted for help. 4 of the 17 killed are allegedly Jewish, and rabbis from the surrounding area are now offering counseling services for the families affected. Nicolas Cruz reportedly had been expelled from the high school in Parkland, Florida for, quote, disciplinary reasons. The shooting is just one of nearly 20 since the beginning of 2018 in the United States, highlighting an epidemic of gun violence yet again. There are 33,000 gun-related deaths annually in the United States. The region is spiraling into conflict in the aftermath of some of the biggest clashes between Israel and enemy forces in decades. The IDF is conducting a full investigation into what exactly caused the crash of an Air Force F-16 fighter jet yesterday. They now believe that shrapnel, likely from a Syrian anti-aircraft missile, is what downed the jet.
I've been warning for some time about the dangers of Iran's military entrenchment in Syria. Iran seeks to use Syrian territory to attack Israel for its professed goal of destroying Israel. This morning, Iran brazenly violated Israel's sovereignty. They dispatched an Iranian drone from Syrian territory into Israel, and this demonstrates that our warnings were 100% correct. Israel holds Iran and its Syrian host responsible for today's aggression. We will continue to do whatever is necessary to protect our sovereignty and our security.
To put this in perspective, the last time enemy forces shot down an Israeli jet was in 1982, during the First Lebanon War. Indeed, the exchange of fire seen over the weekend was some of the worst in over a decade. Things first escalated into violence after an Iranian drone in Syria breached Israeli airspace. Israel downed the drone, then launched a counterattack on Syrian military targets. An Israeli F-16 was hit during an exchange of fire, but fortunately the pilot managed to fly the aircraft back into Israel and ejected before the crash. He was critically injured but is now in stable condition. The downing of the aircraft prompted a second Israeli counterattack, this time targeting Syrian anti-aircraft defenses. At this time, at least 6 Syrian troops from President Assad's regime have been killed in those strikes. The IDF has confirmed that at least 4 Iranian targets in the region were also hit in the airstrikes, and needless to say, Israel is bracing for the worst. These escalations in Syria, which may be the first true open warfare seen between Israel and Iranian forces, obviously hold massive implications for the rest of the region as well. Well, ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here to elaborate. Now, Brett, what kind of reactions are we seeing?
Well, first of all, both Iran and Syria have completely denounced Israel's counterattack. This all started when an Iranian drone entered Israeli airspace, prompting an Israeli Apache to shoot it down. But those countries are both denying that the drone even left Syria in the first place. According to them, this is just an Israeli lie or just some excuse to start a war.
Well, that's highly unlikely considering the army has already released the footage of the drone being shot down in Israeli territory,
Correct.
right?
And on top of that, I think it's a stretch to presume that Israel would even want to start a war right now at all. I mean, not only would that probably become a very bloody conflict for all parties involved, but it could easily spread to involve the rest of the region. I mean, Hezbollah soldiers in Lebanon, for example, we just saw them driving a convoy near the Israeli border, waving flags, kind of celebrating the downing of the Israeli F-16 fighter.
Well, that's sort of the response that we're seeing from the Palestinians as well. I know in Gaza there was open partying in the streets and reports of people passing around sweets in the West Bank to celebrate, right?
Well, for an Israeli jet to go down at all, I mean, that's a very significant thing to happen. I mean, I don't think that's happened since the First Lebanon War. The United States, of course, has immediately defended Israel's right to defend itself, but keep in mind that Syria is utterly volatile right now, especially given the massive civilian casualties we've seen last week in the ongoing civil war. And we can't forget now that Russia is very strongly in the mix there, too.
Right, and the balance of power between Russia, Iran, and Syria butting heads with
Israel, that's a recipe for a very dangerous game of chicken right there. And it's kind of why the United Nations is kind of saying, hey, everyone needs to de-escalate right now because really a skirmish like this could easily topple the rest of the dominoes here. And I'm just not sure that's even something that anyone, even Iran, really wants right now.
Well, obviously, we'll be keeping a very, very close eye on where this is heading. Thanks for joining us, Brett.
Absolutely.
Saturday's downing of an F-16 marks the first time enemy fire has brought down an Israeli jet since the First Lebanon War in 1982. The craft's 2-man crew ejected at a height of 14,000 feet shortly after an anti-aircraft missile exploded nearby. And fortunately, it looks like everyone is okay. The pilot has just regained consciousness and is now in stable condition. In a leaked debriefing, the 2-man crew explained their quick thinking that made them decide to eject. The IDF is still officially investigating what truly brought the plane down, although enemy shrapnel is believed to be the culprit. But what is clear is that during the firefight, the aircraft ceased responding. The crew ejected just in time, moments before it crashed into a hill in northern Israel. Security cameras in Israel captured the jet as a fireball during its turbulent crash near Kibbutz Chalduf. The crew has been commended for following the proper protocol during an emergency. Though his face has been blurred for security reasons, the Israeli pilot has just been visited by Israeli President Reuven Rivlin in the hospital.
פעם נוספת גם ראינו את הצוותים שפועלים לאחר אימונים רבים ושה-DNA שלהם מדבר בכך שהם דבקים במטרה, לא חוזרים בלי לבצע את המשימה. וזה דבר שאצל המתנגדים ואויבינו הוא דבר חשוב ביותר, שכולם ידעו, לא ניתן לשבש את אורח החיים של מדינתנו ושל אזרחי מדינתנו, ואנחנו לא נעמוד מנגד כאשר מישהו ינסה לשבש, ועל כך מגיעה התודה לכל המערכות הביטחון, וכאן בהזדמנות זאת גם לצוותי האוויר אשר עושים מלאכתם ללא שום איזה שהם פשרות.
Some breaking news from the West Bank just now. 2 IDF soldiers, a male and a female, were just attacked by a group of Palestinians in the West Bank after they accidentally wandered into the Palestinian city of Jenin. They've been safely removed with only light injuries, but one of their weapons was apparently stolen during the skirmish. The IDF has just confirmed that the 2 soldiers are serving at a military base nearby, but it still remains unclear as to how or even why the soldiers accidentally entered the city limits. After the attack broke out, local Palestinian security forces stepped in to safely remove the IDF soldiers from the scene. But by then, one of their weapons had apparently already been stolen by one of the attackers. The military is investigating this incident and conducting a full search for the stolen weapon. The first wave of nearly 20,000 asylum seekers from Africa will face either deportation or jail in less than 2 months. But we've just learned that some of those deportations could begin in just a few days. 200 asylum seekers have been informed that they only have until this Friday to decide whether to be deported to an unspecified country in Africa or else be put in Israeli jail forever. The government's controversial plan to deport an estimated 40,000 asylum seekers, mostly Christians from Eritrea and Sudan, has been met with fierce protest here in Israel and abroad. Netanyahu has branded this community as illegal infiltrators. The vast majority, however, say they fled war, genocide, and conscription in a slave army as refugees for a better life here in Israel. Indeed, most Western countries almost unanimously recognize these communities as refugees. To date, Israel has granted refugee status to only 11 out of nearly 40,000. Israel's justice minister has just delivered some fiery remarks related to the Jewish nation-state bill, arguing that keeping a Jewish majority in Israel is actually more important than protecting human rights. It's probably no coincidence that she also mentioned the asylum seeker crisis in this same speech, advocating their expulsion. But outrage against this controversial initiative, especially after Israel's interior minister said the deportations could be done by force, if necessary, continues to erupt. Doctors, ex-diplomats, lawyers, pilots, and even Holocaust survivors here in Israel and abroad have urged the government not to submit asylum seekers to possible, if not very likely, human trafficking in Rwanda and Uganda. The United Nations has offered to help Israel relocate asylum seekers to countries deemed safe, but with the very first deportations potentially about to begin in just 2 days, it remains unclear if the government is willing to listen. The trial of 17-year-old Ahed Tamimi begins today. Tamimi is the Palestinian teen who was filmed slapping an IDF soldier near her home in the West Bank last December, all in an apparent attempt to elicit a violent response from him on tape. Tamimi and a relative were arrested on charges of assaulting a soldier, and as we speak, her trial is now being heard. This case has ignited fierce debate not just in Israel but abroad as well. Footage of the incident showed Tamimi, 16 at the time, slapping an IDF soldier and yelling at him. When that video went viral, some Israelis praised the troops for obeying protocol and not responding with force, while others say the soldiers actually humiliated Israel by not fighting back. Tamimi was arrested during an overnight raid following the incident. She later testified that she acted the way she did because she witnessed the same soldier shoot her cousin in the head with a rubber bullet mere hours earlier. Gory pictures of her cousin, apparently gruesomely injured in the head, soon surfaced. This controversial case has sparked global interest, with rights groups and American celebrities demanding the teen's release. Though the judge did initially rule that Tamimi posed no actual danger, she was ultimately kept in jail until her trial today.
لا نتوقع عدل أمام هذه المحكمة. هم يحاولوا تعظيم التهمة من أجل تعظيم العقوبة، وذلك أنهم محكومين برأي عام إسرائيلي يميني متطرف من قيادات تضغط باتجاه حكم عالي، وهم يريدون كسر النموذج حتى لا يكون قدوة أمام المجتمع الفلسطيني، وبالتالي هاي عوامل تشير أنه من الممكن أن يكون الحكم.
The Tamimi family is no stranger to controversy, nor even charges like these. Some have accused Tamimi's father of grooming his children for violent resistance against Israel. Though some point out that the family, whose village is divided by both Area B and Area C of the West Bank, has endured some of the strictest policies of the occupation for nearly their entire lives. Whatever the verdict, the debate is likely to continue for months to come. All right, Israel's French embassy has just announced that it will boycott the opening ceremony of the Israeli Film Festival in Paris because of plans to screen Foxtrot as its opener. The Israeli film won critical acclaim abroad, snagging the Silver Lion at the Venice Film Festival and making it to the shortlist for this year's Foreign Film Oscar. Israel's Culture Minister Miri Regev, however, is denouncing the film for its depiction of IDF soldiers. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here. And Brett, is it any coincidence that Regev is in Paris right now?
I would say probably not a coincidence, no. The Culture Minister has been lobbying hard for the Foreign Ministry to actually withdraw its support from funding the Paris Israeli Film Festival altogether. And after repeated requests from the government to swap the film out for a less controversial film fell through.
Now, I understand that as of today, Miri Regev still hasn't seen the film, am I right?
Correct, no. By her own admission, no, she has not.
Well, and have you seen Foxtrot?
I have. Yes.
So what is your take on this then as a film guy? Because I haven't seen it myself.
Okay, so look, film is subjective. So for me, this sequence in Foxtrot that's igniting all this controversy, all this hate from an Israeli leader, in my opinion, it's pretty overblown. I mean, is the scene critical of the IDF? Sure. I mean, yes, I think you can say that. But Israel's a country that calls itself the only democracy in the Middle East. And frankly, that sort of self-reflection through art, that criticism from a director who also served Israel in war, by the way, that's not something you want to jeopardize.
Now, it's, similar to President Rivlin's position on Foxtrot, too, but something interesting here is that there have been many Israeli films just as controversial as Foxtrot, if not more so, but typically you don't see reactions like this from government leaders.
No, I think you're totally right. I mean, just to name one, Waltz of Bashir, which that's an animated doc hybrid about an Israeli conduct during the 82 Lebanon War. I mean, that film is fiercely critical of the IDF. But Waltz of Bashir actually played this same film festival a few years back, and there was zero backlash then.
Well, film, of course, is its own sort of foreign diplomacy. On one hand, Israeli stories making their way to world audiences is helpful, and it's so important. But on the other hand, there's always that risk of propaganda if it's completely unchecked.
Sure. I mean, I will say that the film world is a community, and let's not forget a business as well. It's a pretty huge one, actually. Venice, Berlin, Cannes, the biggest festivals in the world, all have major Israeli benefactors, sometimes even direct ties to the Israeli government. I mean, the Berlin Film Festival, for example, they're literally about to give an award to the executive director of the Israeli Film Fund this week when the festival kicks off. So for Regev to demand kind of this global boycott of one film while kind of facilitating deals for the others at the same time,
Right, I mean, it could come back to hurt Israel's film industry in general, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. All right, thanks for joining us, Brett.
Thanks, Natasha.
All right, now here's some major news for all of you football fans out there. 7 former and current NFL players have landed in the Holy Land for a week-long trip. This is a big deal because last year their trip was unfortunately barred by a lot of controversy. So who's joining? Well, the delegation is made up of current NFL stars Chris Harris Jr., Josh Norman, Vic Beasley, and get this, the NFL's only Jewish brothers, Jeff and Matt Schwartz. The players' busy schedule will include a dip in the Dead Sea, a visit to Jerusalem's Western Wall, and even a meeting with Israeli government officials, including the Prime Minister and the President. The pro-Israel organization American Voices in Israel put together the entire trip, and they say they hope it will, quote, help the American population get a deeper understanding of what's happening in Israel. Well, last year's NFL player trip didn't go as planned when 6 out of the 11 scheduled athletes decided to cancel their participation in the trip at the last minute. The players claimed they were being used as Israeli government mouthpieces, even though the Israeli government insisted the trip would show a balanced side of Israel. To avoid the controversy this time around, organizers decided to keep mum on who would be arriving and waited until the players landed in Israel to release statements to the media. And now for our top 5 with ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh.
Israelis love a good challenge, constantly seeking the most thrilling activities. Well, are you looking for a shot of adrenaline? Because if you are, and you're heading to the Holy Land, these are the top 5 extreme sports to do while visiting. At number 1, we have caving, said to be one of the most dangerous sports out there, and Israel is an absolute dream for you cave explorers, because the Holy Land has more than 4 caving areas: Mount Sodom, Jerusalem Hills, Upper Galilee, and the Hebron Hills in the West Bank. Now, keep in mind, caving consists of climbing, hiking, and rappelling, so it's definitely not an activity you want to be doing alone. I know I sure wouldn't. Second on our list is rappelling, otherwise known here in Israel as snappling. The controlled descent down a rope against a cliff sounds a bit absurd, no? Well, the views here in Israel are out of this world, so what better place to go rappelling than the Ramon crater in the Negev, or how about the Black Canyon trails in the Golan Heights? Now listen up, before you try this, I did try this myself once, and let me tell you, it looks and sounds way easier than it actually is. But then again, I do have a fear of heights. All right, third on our list is skydiving, and if we haven't convinced you of Israel's breathtaking views, this experience sure will. Civilian skydivers must take a course and get at least 10 jumps under their belt before being allowed up to 12,000 feet in the air. Not that I'd want to be anywhere near those heights, but if you're looking for that adrenaline shot, check out Israel's largest skydiving school, Paradive, for some free-falling fun. Now, number 4 is paragliding. Very different from skydiving, people. Trust me, this one I actually tried. All you do is get strapped up with the equipment and literally just fly off the cliffs into the sky. Israel has more than 25 launch pads all over the country and more than ideal weather conditions. The best views in the world with the best weather flying high. What's better than that? Last but definitely not least is the Azrieli Tower Race. Now, this one I just recently heard about and just had to share. What if I told you it would be fun to go run up the stairs of one of Israel's highest skyscrapers? Would you do it? I think not. Well, a few locals decided this would be the test amongst them of who was the fittest of them all. 1,144 stairs and 54 floors in 7 minutes is the record. If you think you can beat them, get on a plane and prove it. That's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.